Hi, I'm Sherry McGill, and you're watching Lessons Learned. In this episode of Lessons Learned, you'll learn how to make a juicy, summery table runner out of a fruit-themed charm pack and some hand-dyed fabrics. It's going to look great on your table this summer. All the fabric requirements and measurements are posted in the description box. Have fun! So as you saw in the introduction, I chose to randomly pick out some fabrics and make a table runner. Well, I didn't randomly pick fabrics. I kind of had something in mind. I knew I wanted to get a charm pack out since I have so many of those and use one of those, as well as some hand-dyed fabric that I got at the Paducah Quilt Show. So I actually used 8 squares out of this charm pack and cut them in half. So that made those 2.5 by 5. And then my hand dyed, I took 2 of the fabrics, and no, I took all 3 fabrics that I picked out, or 4, and I cut them into 2.5-inch strips, and I cut sections of 9 inches and 3 inches. So 12 and 5 is 17. So this will be about 16 inches wide. And I think it's around 40 inches long, something like that. So this is the way they went together. At first I thought, oh, I'm just going to throw them randomly together side by side and see what happens. But my OCD just would not let me let that be. So I was able to organize them in a way that makes sense to me. And you can see that I have long pieces dark on one side, long pieces light on the other side, and vice versa with the short. So there's 2 different pieces of the charm pack that are similar, so the 8 pieces make the 16 pieces. So altogether I have 16 strips there, and I'm going to sew them together in this formation that I have laying here right now. So when I get that done, I'll show you what's next. Okay, I wanted to show you while I was sewing these strips together how I keep myself organized in such a way that I don't make a mistake. I brought all of them over here with the first one on top and then down from there to the bottom, and I have that stack over here in the throat area of my sewing machine. And then this was the first one right here, and then once I got this one on, then I just kept adding one successively that way, so that, and now I've got enough here I can see my pattern clearly, that I'm not going to turn one around or grab something that's not supposed to go next, because this is the order that I wanted them in. So that's just a little tip on how to keep it straight. Okay, so I got those all sewn together. Everything looks correct. I opened the seams and pressed them open, and I pressed all my seams open, as a matter of fact, the ones going across and the ones that I just did going across the width of it. So it comes out to about 32.5 right now by 16.5. So that's going to be good for my seam allowances for my border and or binding for it. So I haven't decided yet on if there will be a border. I'm thinking about maybe taking some of these extra squares that I have and sewing those together to make a binding around the edge like that. I think that would be plenty. I don't think I'll put a border on it because it's already plenty wide enough for a table runner. So the only thing I have left to do is I would like to straighten up the edges a little bit. This edge here is pretty straight because that's the one I started sewing from, but I have a few here that are a little bit zigzaggy. So I'm going to go ahead and straighten that up a little bit. Actually, that side doesn't really need anything at all, but this side I think I'll take a good 1/4 of an inch off here if I can find my line. Just gonna kind of wing it, kind of, sorta, and then go the rest of the way up. This is going to be a stretch, so hopefully I don't slip and cut my hand off or anything like that. Okay, there we go. So that's got that all nice and flat now. So let me go ahead. So we've got a table runner that's going to wind up being about 16 by 32, which is as long as it is wide, and that's a perfect size for a table runner. So let's go on to the next step, which will be cutting out the squares for the border and sewing those together. Okay, so here I am taking my remaining halves that I didn't use out of those 8 that I cut in half, and I'm joining them on the short end until I have enough to go all the way around the table runner, and I need somewhere around 90 something inches. So I didn't actually count out yet what I need for that, but I will let you know. And then now that I've got all of the pairs together, then I'll take the pairs and put them end to end as well, and see, you can see how that's going to form my binding. This is 2.5 inches wide, so once I fold it in half, it'll be the perfect size for a binding. Okay, so I have my binding pieces mostly together. I have 3 strips of 8, and that's going to make it all the way around my quilt. 2 will go on the long sides, and then the other one will be cut into, well, it won't be cut into 2, but if you cut it into 2, each piece would fit each end. So I'm going to join these all as one big long piece, and I'm not going to do the slanted way of joining them, you know, where you distribute the weight, because I've already got all of these seam allowances in here. I'm just going to do straight seam allowances to join them, because I'm really close on this fitting all the way around. Not super close, but too close to do those sideways angled joins. So let me do that, and I'll show you my binding when I get done. Okay, so here we are with our binding finished, and I've already I pressed open my seams, all those little seams in there, and then, well, here, I didn't show you, did I? There you go. Press those open, and then I loosely positioned it around here to make sure I had enough, and it looks like I've got a good amount to be able to close up my binding. Of course, I won't be doing it on this corner. I'll probably do it along a side or an end, but I'm ready to find some batting and some backing and do a little quilting on this, and then I'll get my binding on. Okay, so I've chosen my backing. Look familiar? And my batting, I found a piece just the right size, and I'm just going to use some spray adhesive. This is from Dritz. Like I said last time I used this, I'm just trying to use it up because it's not my favorite, but it'll work fine for this. So I'm just going to peel my top and back. I've already done the other side, and I'm just going to do a few squirts here and there. Not a whole lot. You don't want to get this stuff all over your board or your floor or your table, whatever. So let's leave this up so I can smooth this out. It's kind of a thin 100% cotton batting. It has the scrim or the rough side up towards the, did I spray that? I don't think I did I? Up towards the top. At least that's the way I use it. I've had people use it with the scrim on the bottom. That's what I'm gonna do. So I'm thinking about just doing some wavy lines through this, either this way or some combination of both. But before I do that, I'm going to use some large pins to pin down some of this as well. Grab one here in the middle, and maybe on each of the corners. And so on. So now I'll show you some free motion quilting. Honestly, I think that's plenty. Let's trim it. I'm keeping my walking foot on to attach my binding. I'm going to use a number 2 stitch length for that, and a 1/4 inch seam. Okay, so here we are at the end of putting our binding on. I've stopped here, and then I had started back here. So that's about 10 inches. You ideally want to leave about 12, but we're going to make it work. So let's just fold these over each other and find the center of where we stopped and started, which is about right there where that seam is. So I'm just going to cut that little seam right there and put it there. Take this little, I'm going to go ahead and cut that little area off there where the seam allowance was on that join. Make it nice, and we need to keep an overlap of a 1/2 inch. So let's see here, how much do we have? Let's do it right about there. I'm just eyeballing 1/2 inch, And then we'll take this, open it up, put right sides together, and sew a 1/4 inch. Okay. Alright, let me get my little, oops, tails off here. And then I'm just gonna finger press this open and fold it over. And that should be exactly what we need to finish. So I'm gonna go back up to this where I left off. Back stitch. Keep going until we meet up with our other end here. Okay, there we are, binding all done all the way around. You notice I stopped on each of those corners, so I'm going to go back and cut my tails off up here, these corners. Okay, so now it's time to take the walking foot off and put the binding foot on. And I'm going to go to the iron and iron this to the back as well. It helps if you don't put it in upside down. Helps a lot. It's the binding foot that I like to use. If you go to sewing parts online, sewing machines, what is it called? Sewing machines online, or sewing parts online. You can get this there. Quilt binding foot. I like it because it holds down the binding nice and flat. This whole area right here will hold your binding down nice and flat. And you can sew it from the front side, so you know your front side's going to look really good. And you can also see on your back side how it's going to turn out. I'll show you. It always catches, so you don't have binding not finished on the back, not attaching like you do sometimes. But there will be plenty of material here that you can sew into, and it'll catch every time on the back. I'm gonna go iron this first. I'll be right back. Now you're probably going to ask me, why in the world do I have all of these little clips on there? But when you use this binding foot, you're kind of going at it blindly as far as the back goes, but on the front you're going to go right in that little area right there where your seam attaches. So each one of those joins that I had on this binding, now I wouldn't always have to use this many, but because every 5 inches I have a join or a seam, I need to put an extra clip on that. So normally when you use these clips, let me see if I can find one where you can see it really good. Probably this yellow one here is the best one. But when you put these on, the very edge of the clip should be even with this. So don't smash it on down like that, but rather just get the exact amount of fabric that'll fit from the spring of that clip down to the edge of the fabric. So if it's bunching up on you, then you need to back it up a little bit. See, and make it even. I don't know if you can see that that's exactly even. And then that way when you go down through here, of course you're going to pull that out before you get to that, but you're going to be sewing along down through here right in that ditch, and then when you take this off, it'll stay in the place that it needs to be, so that it's going to catch. Because if you see this back here where the stitching is, that's what you're going to be sewing through from the front. So you want at least, you know, what, 1/8 of an inch or so there. So if you put your clip on to where it's even, exactly even, and it's not bunched up onto the spring, then you've got it positioned right. Hope that makes sense to you. So these clips are this size for a reason. You want to get it exactly even with that edge there, and then when you sew through, you'll have a nice even edge on the back. That's the hope. Now, it isn't always perfectly straight on the back. Sometimes you get a little more, sometimes you get a little less, but the more clips you put, the better chance you're going to have of getting it right. And then where I have those seams, there's a little bit extra because there's some bulk there, but that needs to be there so that it will come out even. Without the seam, there's no extra. With the seam, there's a little extra hanging down. So I hope that helps. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this down now. And let me get my little container of clips so I can throw them in there. So the right hand side of the foot should run along the edge of your binding, and your needle should not be running through your binding, but rather just to the left of it in that ditch, and that should be exactly where your seam that you just did with the walking foot is. I'm going to backstitch just a little bit. So don't watch your edge so much, because it could be your binding could be beyond the edge, but rather watch where your needle is. And make sure you're just to the left of the binding. And when your binding is the same color as your fabric that you're sewing through, it's kind of hard to see, so you really have to concentrate on that. I'm waiting until the last second to take these out because there's so many of them and I need them to be there. And that probably was the end of my bobbin. Okay, there we go. So just take your time on your binding, especially one with a lot of joins like this. And you're going to have stuff that's not quite right. You start looking on your back and you see that you didn't catch something. See, I have a little piece here that did not join, didn't catch it from the binding on the front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip that back down where I know it's going to catch this time, and I'm going to sew it again. Just go right over top of your stitches out a ways. Go right over those stitches again. Okay, let's see if we caught it this time. Yep, we did. Can you tell that I redid it? No. And it looks good. It's pretty close, but it's attached this time. So I'm just going to go around very carefully and check all of my edges here and make sure they all caught. And don't get discouraged if you've got some that don't, because you can just readjust and go right over top of it again. Here's another one. See? Don't worry about it. Just get it down there. Go back to the front. Do it again. Do a balancing act there because my clip was holding it, but I couldn't leave the clip there, so I had to hold my finger down on it really hard when I took the clip off. Okay. Now I caught it in there. It's not gorgeous, but it's the back of it. So, you know, it's not something that's going to be seen a lot. It's laying on a table with the pretty side up. But you do want those to be all enclosed, so you're going to have to go back and fix anything that didn't catch. But if you put those clips on there the way I was showing you, more times than not, you're going to have it. You're going to have good success rate. But even I didn't have a 100% success rate on this one. I had, what, 2 little areas that I had to fix? But nobody would ever know that that's what happened. This is really cute. I like it. Let's go set it on the table and see what it looks like.
oh, oh.